Season 16 might be the biggest meta shift we've ever had, so I'm here making a tier list to help you choose what guns you want to have in your loadout. With that being said, let's jump straight into our first tier, D tier. And first up we have the P2020. The P2020 has always been kind of a meme gun, but now with hammer points it's sort of useful, but it's a legendary hop-up, so you'll never really find it that much, and without hammer points it can never hold its own against basically any other gun. Although the addition of the laser sight in the previous season is good, because the P2020 never really had any barrel attachments, it's still not enough to put it anywhere above D tier. Next up we have the Devotion. I really don't like the Devotion ever since they nerfed Turbocharger to reduce damage by 1 in every shot. That might not seem like a lot, but as we'll see further on with the R9, that actually makes a huge difference for high fire rate guns. And let's be honest, you're never not going to take the turbocharger, because at that point the Devotion is just really bad. With a long spin up time and slow fire rate in the beginning, it's really useless. And the third gun in D tier is the Rampage. Although I don't think the Rampage is that bad, the main issue is that it requires the thermite to be good, in which case breaking doors is actually a really big plus. But the Spitfire just does everything the Rampage does but better. It has a higher fire rate, higher DPS, and it's just much easier to land shots. If you have a big stock of thermites, for example if you're playing Fuse, the Rampage could go up 1 or 2 tiers, but in most cases you'll never want to pick it up. So that's it for our D tier, and now let's move up to C. As in D tier, these guns are not useless. You can use them in an early game fight just to win your 1v1, but you'd want to swap them out for something better in the mid game. And the first weapon in C tier is the Mozambique. Although it has hammer points and it's really strong with them, being a legendary hop-up makes it really hard to find. On top of that, the Mozambique is the only shotgun that didn't actually get a buff this season, unlike the other shotguns who are much higher on the list. And for our second gun in C tier, we have the Longbow. The Longbow now needs to be crafted, which actually brings it down a lot. You used to be able to take it to hold some attachments for a better sniper like a charge rifle or a sentinel, but now having to craft it, there's just no point in going for it. The higher fire rate doesn't really fit a sniper that much, and you'd rather get a big powerful shot with a sentinel or a super accurate hit scan shot with a charge rifle. And if for some reason you prefer the higher fire rate, you can just take the repeater instead, no need to craft. And the next gun in this tier list might actually be one of my most controversial picks. It's the L-Star. I know people say it's underrated and really good, and although it is decent, it's always better to take any other energy gun. You can take a triple take, which has more range, you can take a Havoc, which has a way better recoil, or you can even craft a Volt to have an SMG. The L-Star has really complicated recoil, it has really bad hipfire spread, and all of that for less DPS than the Volt. So while yes, it's not a D tier gun, but it's also not really good. It's C tier for me. And the last gun we have here is the once really feared but now pretty much useless Spitfire. So the Spitfire used to have really good hipfire spread and really easy recoil with high damage, so you could just beam people for days. But now it has really bad hipfire spread, the damage is super low, and although the recoil is still manageable, taking away the barrel stabilizer made it not be as much of a beam as it was, especially on 3x and 4x scopes. In my opinion, you'll find yourself struggling to hit any shots due to the hipfire at close range, and you'll find yourself out DPS'd at mid-range by R301 and the Nemesis. So that's our C tier, and we can start moving up to our B tier. B tier is actually pretty usable guns, which if you want you could even take to mid and sometimes late game. Although they are mostly just comfort picks where you're very comfortable with the gun and you can use it well. If not, I'd recommend drop these for another one higher up. And to start off B tier, I have the Repeater. The Repeater has been repeatedly buffed over the seasons, and it has gone from being a bottom tier gun to actually being pretty usable in the right hands. It's got the dual shell, so you can reload quicker, which was actually one of the big problems, and now scoping in ramps up the damage faster, so you can actually hit some pretty decent 57 and I think 48 shots with a fully charged Repeater. Despite that, the Repeater doesn't really offer anything new. It has a pretty average fire rate, it has some good damage, but it's not a hit scan, so the charge rifle will always be better than it. Overall, the Repeater just doesn't offer anything special compared to other options further up in the list. But that is definitely not the case with the second weapon in B tier, the triple take. The triple take can actually be a pretty good weapon, and over the seasons we've seen triple take metas rise and fall. And that is all due to a single value, the choke-in time, the time you have to ADS for all the shots to fully concentrate into one. That can make the triple take really good, because it hits for a consistent 70 damage and it's really easy to hit because it's an energy weapon. Right now though, I think the choke time is a little too high. It cannot go much lower because the moment it starts choking in faster than the sentinel fires, then there's really just no point to using the sentinel. It's a harder to hit gun and it also deals 70 damage. So I don't really know what Respawn could do to balance this gun, but right now it's not really that good. You'd rather just take either the charge rifle, the sentinel, or of course if you can find it, a Kraber. And now we have the last marksman in B tier, which is the G7. The G7 has been really good, but ever since it got out of the care package, it has been slightly nerfed and it just cannot compete with the other ARs. It's still pretty decent. You can take it into mid game, as I've said, and you can even try and use it late game, although the single fire makes it really bad for close range and basically forces you to swap out to another weapon. It's got very solid capabilities at long and mid-range, but the fact that you cannot use it from the hip is really detrimental, and it's basically what brings it down to B. And now we have the first SMG in our tier list, the Alternator. The Alternator has always been kind of known as a noob gun because it has really low recoil and pretty average damage, making it really easy to control but not that powerful. And I think that still is the case in Season 16. It's still the Alternator we've always known, and it's really not better than B tier. It's not going to be able to compete with a car, it's not going to be able to compete with the R0, but if you struggle with the recoil, again, it's something you can take in the mid game, maybe late game, and still do fine with it, especially in lower level lobbies. Okay, and after our first SMG, we have our first AR, the Havoc. Now, this gun has always been kind of a mixed bag. It's usually either really strong because it takes very little attachment, or it's really weak because it gets nerfed to the ground. Honestly, right now, I would even put it up in A tier, but I'm bumping it down to B just because the Nemesis is also an energy AR and it's so much stronger than a Havoc. Overall, having a nerf to the turbocharger is also going to bring it down a lot, and not having access to barrel stabilizers actually makes the hard recoil kind of uncontrollable with a 3x or even a 4. Now we have two guns that might actually come as a surprise to many of you. First, we have the Volt. Although the Volt is still pretty good, and I'd put it normally in A tier, what brings it down is the fact that you need to craft. There is absolutely no reason to craft a Volt, because if you want to take an energy gun, you'd obviously take either the Nemesis or the Havoc to hold the attachments to later swap into a Nemesis. Or if you want to take an SMG, you just take any other SMG in this tier list, which is way above it and way more powerful than the Volt. It still has pretty decent recoil, it still has pretty average damage, but now we have SMGs like the R9, which have very manageable recoil. We have SMGs like the Prowler, which has really good hipfire and who can directly compete with the Volt in a lot of ways. So for that reason, and being in the crafter, I'll sadly have to bump the Volt down to B tier. I honestly think it's the worst SMG, apart from the Alternator of course, but it's really not in a good state right now. And now, to top off B tier, we have a gun that I have actually talked about a bit before in this video, the Sentinel. Yes, I've said the Sentinel is pretty much better than all the other marksmen, but it's still a sniper that is not the charge rifle. If you want to take the sniper, just take the charge rifle. It's really good, it's hit scan, it deals a lot of damage, and there's just no reason to take the Sentinel. You could maybe argue that if you're playing Rampart and then you charge up the Sentinel, you get a lot of damage for a headshot, but you're almost never gonna be in that situation. Even then, the charge rifle is still easier to hit and also gets the damage boost. So I don't see really any situation where you take the Sentinel or any other sniper or marksman over the charge rifle because it's so dominant. Keep in mind that if you really want to take it, for example, if you're an absolute quickscope god, you could still use the Sentinel. As I've said, B tier kind of works for mid, late game, but it's also a sniper, so you'll have to swap into another thing for the late game, which is another thing that brings it down a lot. You'll have to swap to either an SMG or a shotgun, which should not be too much of a problem nowadays because everyone's rocking those, but still, it's not going to be great. You'll have to hand down a squad with a sentinel in the late game to be able to make that switch. And with that being said, we move up to A tier. These guns are really good. This is what your loadout should be looking like every match. These are the guns that will get you the most success, that are really good, and you'll be able to take the whole game without any issue. So the first one we have here is actually the R301. The R301 fell a bit from being an absolute S tier, one of the best ARs in the game, to being an A tier with a little bit of a damage nerf, but it does still beam. It is still really good. If you really struggle to control the recoil, for example, of the flatline, the R301 is still a fully automatic, really good option to take, and it will serve you really well. It has obviously access to all the AR attachments, so stabilizer, extended mags, everything, so you can get it out, have a really powerful weapon, really easy recoil, big mag, really easy to beam people. What can I say? It's still the 301, it's still one of the staples of Apex, one of the best weapons in the game. And next up we have the flatline, which is actually pretty similar to the R301. If you like one, you'll probably like the other. The flatline has a bigger mag. I think it has a bit more DPS now that the R301 got nerfed, but it kicks really hard. The recoil is really big, and if you can't control it, it's fine. You can just swap to a 301. But if you can control it, it'll actually be a very decent alternative, especially if you're running low on light, or if you're taking, for example, an R9 that's really strong this season. You don't want to be running double light, so the flatline might be a good option to swap into if you can't take the 301. And the third gun in our A tier is the other and last AR in our A tier, the Hemlock. The Hemlock went into the care package, and honestly, I'm not convinced. It's good, it's not anything special though. It's pretty decent, you know, you'll get some good beams, you'll get some good bursts, but because it's a burst weapon, you'll never be able to get those like 200 beams on someone running across an open field. It's more of a pokey gun, and for that you're better off taking any of the snipers, honestly, because the hip fire, which would be the big thing that sets it apart, using it close range hip fire, is really not good, especially with the new AR nerf. It really brings it down. I just don't think the Hemlock is a good option for the care package. Obviously, if you have any other gun in A tier, or if you have a gun that is lower in this list, the Hemlock is absolutely going to be a really good gun to swap into. Maybe if you have a flatline 301, something like that, you can pass up on the Hemlock. It really depends to you at this point, because they're both really the same. They're both good, good mid-range damage, good poke damage, not so good hipfire now, but still worth picking up. Next up in A tier, we have another gun that has had quite a fall from grace, the Car SMG. It used to be an absolute beast, destroy everyone, but now it has a slightly smaller mag, and not just that, the other SMGs have gotten really buffed, so the car is not as standout anymore. It's still a good beam, it's still going to shred people. You can get really good one mags, especially in people who have a level 2 shield or lower. It's really easy to use, and what can I say, it's still a car, it's still really good, it's a very worthwhile SMG to pick up. And we have the other SMG in A tier, the Prowler. The Prowler is actually really good now. It used to be kind of a meme gun, it was really hard to use, but now that they've buffed the damage, it's actually a pretty good gun. You can use it with hipfire and it will absolutely shred because it has like no spread whatsoever because it's a burst weapon. And it also doesn't need that many attachments to do so. Basically a laser sight and a mag is all you'll ever need for this gun. And another gun that will barely need any attachments, and it's also in our A tier, is the Wingman. The Wingman really needs no introduction. It basically needs no attachments. It's a super versatile gun. Maybe if you get a mag, it'll spike up in power a bit, but even then, it's just still really powerful, even off drop. It's one of the best guns you could land on, but it's in A tier because it's pretty hard to use. The average person is not gonna be able to get that much value from it, but if you're an actual super sweat god at the game, you'll obviously want to pick this up all the time because it hits really hard. 78 headshot, 45 damage body shot, has a really good DPS, and you can poke in and out of cover almost like you're using a shotgun with, as I said, very low attachments. It's really powerful gun. And speaking of shotguns, we have the first shotgun on our list because they all got so buff. They're all the way up there, but it's the Eva. The Eva got a buff. It's way easier to hit shots close range, but it's still not enough to make it compete with the other two shotguns. The Peacekeeper and the Mastiff are just absolute monsters this season. You're gonna be able to hit really beefy shots, and the Eva just doesn't deliver on that. The shotguns are usually made to poke in and out of cover, hit quick shots, and having a shotgun that it's automatic and it's almost hybrid between an SMG and a shotgun, in my opinion, doesn't really work that well. The only time we saw the Eva be really meta was when it had a crazy high damage, it hit for almost as much as the PK, and it had a faster fire rate, but at that point, that's just OP. There's just no reason why that gun should be in the game, should have ever been in the game. But in this current state, the Eva is good, you can pick it up, but if you're looking to run a shotgun, I'd absolutely recommend swapping into any of the other shotguns. Well, except the Mozambique, of course, but we've already talked about that. And to finish off A tier, we have another care package gun, and it's the bow. I know a lot of people like the bow. I hate the bow. I really don't like the bow. I can't use the bow. It's really something I'd rather pass up on. I'll always leave it to my teammates. I know it hits for good 70 damage, and actually the Valentine's Day LTM where you had that bow that actually healed you was really OP. That bow was absolutely fantastic, but it was mostly the fact that it healed you and you could just keep re-peeking the angle and hitting shots to stay alive. And the bow in its current state, hitting 70 damage, having the shatter caps, I can see how it's really good and how good players would turn it OP if it got buffed, but honestly, it's just not for me. I can never find any success with a bow. If you can, go ahead, pick it up. It might even be S tier in your hands, but I really can't see a world where I give the bow anything higher. Now we start our S tier. These are the absolute best guns. You'll want this to be your loadout. If you could take any combination, well, not any, but a close range and a long range weapon from this tier, you'd have an absolutely monstrous loadout that you can take all the way to late game and win with it. The R9. The R9 is an absolute monster. It destroys everyone. Having its damage buffed to 12 is the same damage it had when it was in the care package. And keep in mind, R9 in the care package wasn't really a top tier care package gun, but wasn't really bottom tier either. It was way better than, for example, the Rampage last season. And I bet a lot of us would love to have a charged up Rampage, you know, a care package Rampage, I mean, off drop. It would have been amazing. So having an R9 is really good. You will one mag people a lot now. It's really easy. You can even have bullets left after one mag, especially with purple mags, and it's really good. It's an absolute monstrous gun, has a lot of DPS. I think it even has more than the Devotion. I think it's the highest DPS gun in the game right now. So you'll always want to pick this up. The only time you'd probably drop this is either for a Prowler or for one of the shotguns, or one gun that I think you guys know what it is. It's a care package gun, but it's also really good, and it's here in S tier. And that gun is the RE45. This gun is an absolute beast. It will shred through shields in the late game where everyone has the red shields, and it's usually where you'll get the RE because of the supply drops. You will melt people with this. The RE is really powerful. It doesn't hit as hard on the body, but the fact that it shreds through shields will put fear into anyone, will make people just retreat to bat up. It will turn fights around. It will make fights. It will absolutely destroy everyone. And talking about destroying, we have, of course, the Nemesis, the new gun. It's really powerful. It's one of the best. It's really good, and it's gonna get nerfed. Let's face it, it's just no way Respawn just keeps the gun like this. They themselves said they launched it to be really OP so everyone would use it, and right now I don't even know how I feel about it. I kind of like the faster time to kill, but it also feels frustrating just getting beamed out of nowhere when that's not really how Apex usually plays. This is a really divisive gun. I can see this being meta for a long time and actually being one of the hardest weapons to balance, because having a 4-round burst means even 1 damage in each bullet makes a lot of difference. It really takes away from the DPS a lot, and having the fast ramp up, that looks like it's going to give Respawn a lot of trouble balancing, but we'll see in the future how it goes. For now, always pick up the Nemesis. Easily the best AR, easily one of the best guns in the game, and it only has 2 long-range rivals, and they are, of course, I've been teasing it the whole video as well, the charge rifle. Absolute monster, really good, a top tier weapon, hit scan, a lot of damage. It uses a little bit more sniper ammo, but that's not even a problem. You can just pick up double stacks, and it can be paired with, for example, a shotgun, which are really good this season as well. And then you can run 2 weapons which occupy very little space. They need very little ammo, so you can just have a ton of charge rifle shots, just be an absolute nuisance, just kill everyone from a range, just crack shields on everyone, third party fights really easily, get cheeky knocks on ongoing fights. It's super annoying. It's only really topped by the other sniper in S tier, the Kraber. Of course, the Kraber is an absolute monster. It's been nerfed, I know, but it can still get the one shots. If you didn't know, you just have to hit people which have a level 2 or lower helmet or don't have a red shield, and it's still a absolute beast. It's still going to create really good openings for you to push. If anything, the 140s will really scare people off, will absolutely level up your shield at light speed. It's really good to farm evo, it's really good to get peaks. It's still going to be an absolutely monster gun. And the last 2 guns in S tier, which I have to say not necessarily the best, just the ones I saved for last, are the 2 shotguns, the Peacekeeper and the Mastiff. They're basically the same, to be honest. They have really good poke damage, they have really good kind of sustained damage. If you get caught out without cover, you can maybe work something out, you know, killing people, but they're going to shine at playing in and out of cover. Be in cover, peek out, take a shot, go back in. Make sure you don't get hit, don't get beamed by SMGs. That's how you play these shotguns, and they're going to be absolutely destroying everyone. You'll be hitting 80s, you'll be hitting 70s, you'll be hitting those beefy shots that were actually pretty hard before, but now with the new buff and a bigger pallet size, it's absolutely amazing. It feels incredible to use these guns, and they're going to shred through everyone in the lobby. So that's our tier list. Make sure to comment what your thoughts are. Any guns you think should be higher, any guns you think should be lower, any guns you completely agree, anything you completely agree and just want to crucify me in the comments. Feel free to share, and I'll see you in the next one.